She said it in front of my children, in front of a sheet cake and paper plates, in front of a circle of parents who pretended they didn't hear it, even as their shoulders pinched up like they were bracing for a storm. She pointed at the frosting smear on my son's chin and at the juice box I'd swapped in for soda. Then she announced, like a judge passing sentence, a mother who doesn't listen to her elders raises ungrateful children. And then she added the part that snapped something in me. If you'd stop trying to be their friend and start being a proper mother, they might learn respect. My daughter Olivia went very still, like a rabbit that smells a hawk. My son Mason stared at me to see if my face would prove her right. I felt the heat crawl up my throat. I felt 12 pairs of eyes pretend to look at the banner, at the balloons, at the pile of wrapped books I'd asked people to bring instead of plastic toys. I said calmly, because rage and calm sometimes wear the same coat when you're a mother in public, "We're done here, Mom." I took the cake slicer out of her hand. I handed it to my husband. I told the kids to help me pack the presents. My mother-in-law smiled, that Sunday school smile that means she thinks God's on her side. She said, "You can take your things, but you will not take my grandchildren away from their family the way you take away sugar and television and joy." In that moment, I understood that all the whispered suggestions, all the gentle questions, all the prayer requests with my name tucked into them like a thorn, had been leading to this exact performance. When I met her, I thought I'd won the mother-in-law lottery. She brought a casserole the first night we moved into the little rental with the peeling porch and a carpet that smelled like someone else's dog. She wore a cardigan the color of overripe peaches, and she called me sweetheart in a way that felt like an invitation. She glanced around my kitchen and said, "You're a tidy little thing. We'll get along just fine." She stacked my plates heavier than I would have, but I told myself this was what family looks like. I told myself a woman who raised a son kind enough to fix a stranger's flat tire at midnight couldn't be anything but a good grandmother. I believed her when she said, "I raised 3 and I still remember the nights." I believed her when she said, "I'll follow your rules because you're the mother." And I wanted to believe it so badly that I didn't see the way she lingered at the edge of every choice like a critic pretending to be a fan. It didn't start with the big things. It never does. It started with a nap that could be skipped because the park was beautiful and the sky was forgiving. It started with a cookie after dinner because life is short and childhood is shorter. It started with the way she would sigh when I buckled them into car seats. A soft little exhale, like the world had gotten too safe since the 70s. It started with questions that sounded like compliments. "Are you sure you want to nurse this long, sweetheart? You work so hard. Maybe a bottle would give you a break. Are you sure you want to say no to soccer on Sundays? Church is where children learn to sit still. Are you sure he needs that occupational therapy? Boys are just energetic. Are you sure about that helmet on the scooter? We survived without bubble wrap." And with every "are you sure," she moved my boundary a half inch, because doubt is a pry bar if you let someone else hold it. She called her house Grandma's Fun House, and she said it with a laugh. But the laugh had a hook in it. At Grandma's Fun House, we have treats on Wednesdays because Wednesday is a hard day. At Grandma's Fun House, we watch one more episode because who wants to go to bed sad? At Grandma's Fun House, we say please and thank you, but we don't say Mommy says. At Grandma's Fun House, we don't make a little boy eat a vegetable he doesn't like because that's cruel. When I'd pick them up, they were sugared and sleepy and strange. They were heavier in my arms and lighter in their listening. The first time Olivia told me, "Grandma says God smiles when we make our own choices," and then she looked right at my broccoli and at my bedtime chart, I laughed. It sounded like a bumper sticker. But laughter is sometimes the way we avoid a fight we should have had months before. I tried to be grateful because that is what good daughters-in-law do. They say thank you for the help, even when the help arrives wrapped in instructions they didn't order. I wrote her lists. I wrote them in friendly markers, green for go ahead, blue for if you have time, red for these matter. She would send me photos of my red list items undone and my blue list items treated like a game. She'd text me mid-meeting to ask if I really meant 7 p.m. and not 7:30, because 7:30 just feels kinder. She'd text me a picture of Mason without his allergy bracelet and write, "He hates this little prison cuff." Can't we let him play without labels? When I'd remind her he carries an EpiPen for a reason, she'd send me a heart emoji and a verse about fear not, as if scripture could neutralize peanuts. My husband, Daniel, would say she means well, and that sentence would bruise everything and nothing. Because of course she meant well. Villains that wear capes are easy. It's the ones in cardigans that scare you. He would tell me he grew up with nicknames and desserts before dinner, and it didn't kill him. He would tell me he saw his mom hold down 3 jobs and still bring cupcakes to the classroom. He would tell me, "You're the mother, she'll follow your lead." Then he would call her on the drive to work and say something like, "Maybe ease up on the treats, Mom." But he'd say it with a smile in his voice, and she would say, "I hear you, darling." Then she would drop off a tray of cinnamon rolls the size of my children's faces with a note that said, "Because I hear you." When Olivia started parroting adult phrases I had never used, that's when the air changed in our house. She's 8, earnest, and careful. She began to tell Mason, "You don't have to listen to Mom if she is upset, because Grandma says adults should self-regulate first." She told me I was shaming her when I asked her to pick up the beads she spilled, because Grandma says mess is a sign of creativity. She told Daniel that Mommy gets overwhelmed because her own mother was too strict, and that's why she tries so hard to be the opposite, which is a wild thing for an 8-year-old to say, unless someone older laid the track for it. I sat on the kitchen floor after bedtime and I stared at the dish towel. I thought about how love can be used like a lever, not to lift, but to pry. I thought about how my daughter was being taught that my rules were proof of my lack of love. The first big break came at the pediatrician's office. We'd asked my mother-in-law to pick up Mason because his school called about a hive patch. It wasn't serious, but they were nervous. I left work early and met them in the parking lot. I found him holding a half-eaten bakery cookie, the kind with chopped nuts pressed into the top like confetti. My breath tried to leave my body in one piece. She clucked at me and said, "Don't be dramatic. He's fine." I checked the label. It's walnuts, not peanuts. When I said cross-reactivity can still be dangerous and that we'd talked about reading labels in actual words and not in wishes, she told me, "There's a spirit of fear in this generation, and someone needs to break it." My son watched me argue for his safety like it was an opinion. I started writing things down, because writing is how you tell yourself you're not crazy. I opened a notes app and I put dates. I put quotes. I put her exact phrases in quotation marks, because they did damage and I needed to see the shape of the blade. On March 3rd, she told the church ladies I don't feed my kids enough protein. On March 9th, she told Mason if he told Grandma he didn't like Mommy's rule, Grandma would teach him a trick. On March 15th, she posted a Facebook meme that said, "Gentle parenting is just lazy parenting with pretty fonts," and 3 of Daniel's aunts liked it. I did the thing 1,000 women do and hate themselves for. I went very quiet. I tried to keep the peace. I tried to be the grown-up. And I watched my children learn that a woman who smiles when she hurts you is still considered kind if enough people at the potluck say, "Bless her heart." The second big break came with school pickup. I had asked her for a favor on a Wednesday because Wednesday is the kind of day that eats keys and schedules. I texted her the timing, the snack list, and the reminder that on Wednesdays we skip screens and do library night because both kids are working on reading challenges. When I got home, the house smelled like butter and applause. The TV was loud. Olivia had mascara smudged under her eyes like a raccoon, and she looked guilty and glittery. My mother-in-law waved from my couch like she occupied a throne that belonged to all women named Nana. "We had a girls' afternoon," she chirped. We needed it. When I asked about library night, she said, "We made a memory instead." When I said, "Memories and discipline are not enemies," she told me, in front of my children, "Stop talking to me like I'm the help. Words don't leave bruises you can photograph, but they bruise just the same." That night, Olivia asked me if Grandma loved her more, because Grandma doesn't get angry about little things. I asked her what little things meant, and she said, like bedtime and helmets and library night and not eating nuts. She said it like my rules were all one exaggerated category. I understood that my mother-in-law had drawn me in caricature, big lines and no nuance, the kind of drawing that makes you laugh until you realize it's supposed to be you. Daniel got stuck between us like gum on a shoe. He tried to peel himself free without touching the mess. He would tell me, "I'm with you," and then tell her, "We both want what's best." He would remind me she's alone now that Dad's gone, and that loneliness makes people cling to the closest thing that feels like purpose. He would remind her that I am their mother and that I am not his ex-boyfriend's girlfriend, a joke he thought helped and that never helped. On the night before the party where everything broke, we sat at the table and he said, "I will handle it. I will tell her no more public comments." And he meant it. He loves me. But love without action is like an apology with a comma. And my mother-in-law doesn't hear commas. The party was supposed to be easy. Pizza on paper plates, kids chasing bubbles, a piñata filled with stickers and bracelets, because I am that mother, the one who buys the non-candy filler and still worries about teeth. My mother-in-law arrived early with a tub of neon punch like a pulled sunrise and a tray of cupcakes that could have paid 1 month of our mortgage in corn syrup. She put them on my counter without asking. She patted my arm. She told me I would stress less if I learned to let go. When I said, "We're doing the cake I ordered," she said, "I brought my own." When I said, "That's not happening," she smiled and waited. She is a woman who can wait for a mistake. And when the mistake arrived in the form of a spilled juice box, a fussy toddler, and a late pizza driver, she stepped into the silence and pronounced judgment. People always ask why you didn't say something sooner. They don't understand that saying something sooner is how you become the villain in a story someone else is narrating. I had said 100 somethings. I had said them sweet and plain and strict and tired. So this time I said something different. I said, "We are taking a break." That's the phrase the therapist gave me. It's calm and impenetrable, like a wall covered in soft paint. I told her we would be taking a break from unsupervised time. I told her we would be putting our rules in writing and that any deviation would mean shorter visits. I told her we would not talk about me like an enemy when I wasn't in the room. I told her we would not say the word respect to children when we meant obedience. She laughed the little laugh that means she wants witnesses. She said, "Do you hear this, Daniel? She's taking my babies." And Daniel said, "They are not your babies, Mom," and his voice didn't shake. For the first time, I saw the boy she raised make a choice she didn't approve of. The fallout came fast and sideways. She posted something on Facebook about modern mothers who put their egos above their children's joy and included a photo of the cupcakes with a caption about wasted blessings. She texted Daniel's sisters and told them to pray for me because I had a spirit of control. She sent a message to the church group asking for advice about how to honor a son when his wife struggles. I learned all of this because women send screenshots when they aren't sure if they're helping or hurting. I also learned that there are a few who see you. One of Daniel's aunts texted me directly and wrote, "I love my sister, but she's wrong. Set your boundaries and keep them." Sometimes one sentence like that is a life raft. I did the boring work that saves families and never goes viral. I met with a counselor who specializes in boundaries. I sat on a lumpy couch and I practiced lines out loud until they didn't taste like guilt. I learned the difference between a consequence and a punishment. I learned that you can love someone and still not let them into your kitchen. I learned that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the absence of permission for chaos. I told the kids we would be seeing less of Grandma for a little while, and I told them it was because adults needed to fix adult things. I told them they could love her and love me, and that love is not a pie you run out of. I told them that when someone says something about mommy that doesn't sound like mommy, they can say, "I'll ask my mom." The first time Mason said it to a cousin who repeated a line he'd heard from his grandmother, I cried in the laundry room between towels. Supervised visits felt like an insult and a relief at the same time. We met at the park with a coffee in my hand like a prop. I watched her kneel and hand Olivia a lip gloss. I watched Olivia glance at me and wait for my nod, and I felt both proud and sad that she knew to check. My mother-in-law would start sentences and then glance at me like she was the one waiting for permission. She would say, "At Grandma's funhouse we," and then stop and say, "At Grandma's we," and then start again and say, "I brought stickers." The visits were small and safe and also tight, like shoes you haven't broken in. One afternoon, she tried the old way again. She said quietly but clearly, "If your mom would let you stay up late like Grandma does, you wouldn't be so cranky." Olivia looked at me. I looked at my mother-in-law. I said, "We are ending early today." And we did. I drove home with 2 children and a silence that didn't hurt. I wrote the words down because I am still a woman who needs proof that happened. When Daniel asked me if we could try again next week, I said yes, because I am not trying to win. I am trying to raise people. I wish I could tell you there was one grand apology that washed it all clean. There wasn't. There were little apologies like confetti that fell and melted into the grass. There were almost apologies, "I'm sorry if, I'm sorry but." There were explanations that tried to disguise themselves as sorrow. I missed raising kids. I miss my husband. I miss mentoring. And I believe her. I believe all of that is true. I also believe that none of it gives her the right to make me the villain in my own house. A month after the party, she asked to come over and talk without the kids. She sat at my table and smoothed the placemat. She told me she didn't know how to be a mother-in-law. She only knew how to be mother. She said she had been important for so long that she forgot how to be supportive. She said she was trying to pass down wisdom and it came out as orders. She said she didn't think my rules were about love until she saw Olivia ask me for a nod before the lip gloss. She cried. I cried. Both of us wiped our faces with napkins that said "Celebrate" in gold. I told her this. I can forgive you and I can love you and I can also keep rules. I can make room for you and still keep my place at the head of my own table. She said, "I will try." I nodded because trying is something, but it is not a contract. So we have a calendar and the visits are shorter. My kids know that Grandma is not a judge and I am not on trial. Daniel is learning to speak to his mother like a son and to me like a partner. The Facebook posts have slowed. The church ladies now pray for patience instead of victory. I sleep better on Wednesdays. I say "I love you" while I'm packing lunches instead of only when the house is clean and the day is done. My daughter makes a chart for her reading challenge and tells me she likes charts because they make her feel hugged. And I think maybe I am raising grateful children after all. People will read this and ask me if I'm cruel for limiting a grandmother. They will say childhood needs glitter and surprise. They will say I am making my house a vessel of rules. And I will tell them this: my house is a vessel of safety and laughter that doesn't need sugar to be sweet. My house is a place where love has structure the way bones have structure, so the body can dance. My house is a place where Grandma can visit if she remembers she is a guest and not a queen. And here's where I ask you, if your mother-in-law told your children that you weren't a proper mother because you didn't take her advice, if she fed them things that could harm them and called your fear a spirit to cast out, if she made jokes about your rules in front of their faces until your 8-year-old learned to say adult words like shaming and respect without understanding the weight, would you keep trying supervised visits? Would you let time sand down the edges? Or would you go no contact and let silence do what apologies haven't?